My son pulled a folding chair right up next to the trash cans at his own child's birthday party, smiled at me like he was doing me a kindness, and walked back inside. I was standing there holding a gift I had spent $3,200 on. I looked at that chair, I looked at those bins, I didn't say a word. I just set the gift down, picked up my purse, and walked to my car. 20 minutes later, I made one phone call, and everything Marcus thought he was about to inherit started disappearing. He just didn't know it yet.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I want you to picture something for me. A backyard on a Saturday afternoon in April. Sun's out. Orange and blue streamers on the fence. A bounce house in the corner. A candy table with those little baggies tied in ribbon. A superhero cake on a folding table by the back door. Children running, laughing. Sneakers slapping the grass. And in the far corner, right next to the laundry area, right beside two black garbage bins that still smelled from the Friday morning pickup, one white plastic chair. No table, no cushion, just the chair. That was my seat. I had driven 45 minutes to get to my son Marcus's house in Gahanna for my grandson Caleb's 7th birthday party. I brought a gift wrapped in brown craft paper tied with baker's twine. Inside was a pocket watch from an antique shop in the short north. 1820s, gold casing, exposed gears, the kind of thing that costs more than it looks. $3,200. I had spent a week thinking about what to give a 7-year-old boy who was going to grow into a man. I wanted him to have something that said, "You come from something." I came through the gate at 5 in the evening. The party was already going. I could hear it from the driveway. Music, kids shrieking, someone's uncle on the grill. Vanessa came out to meet me. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, always put together, cream linen, low heels, hair laid. She had the kind of smile that showed all her teeth, but stopped right there. She hugged me the way you hug someone you don't particularly want touching you. "Oh, Diane, you made it." "Not glad you're here. Not Caleb's going to be so happy. Just, you made it." Like I had survived some obstacle course to get to the front door. I said, of course I made it. I asked where Caleb was. She looked at the box in my arms, clocked it, filed it somewhere in her head. "He's out back with his friends." She touched my elbow. "Let me show you where you'll be sitting." I followed her down the hallway. We passed the dining room. The big farmhouse table I had bought them as a wedding gift, the one that seated 10, that they'd had refinished twice on my dime, was set up beautifully. Fresh flowers in the center, good china, little white name cards at every seat. I could see Sarah, Vanessa's mother, her sister Amanda, a few couples I didn't recognize. No card with my name. We kept walking. Out the back door, past the bounce house, past the candy table, past the grill and the laughter and the streamers, all the way to the back corner, all the way to the bins. "Here you go," Vanessa said. Bless her heart, she sounded warm about it. "I figured you'd want somewhere a little quieter. Away from all the noise." I stood there looking at that chair, and then Marcus came out. My son, 41 years old now. He had his father's jaw and my stubbornness, though he'd turned mine into something uglier. He looked at me, looked at the chair, and smiled. "Hey, Ma. Figured you'd be more comfortable out here." He said it the same way Vanessa had, like it was a favor, like the trash bins were a perk. I looked at him for a long moment. I was searching for something. The boy I had sat up with through ear infections, the teenager I had driven to every track meet. Something. I didn't find it. I set the gift down on the chair without a word. I picked up my purse, and I walked back through that yard, through the hallway, out the front door and down the driveway to my car. I heard Vanessa say something to a guest as I passed, something about the air feeling lighter. I got in the car. I sat there. And I felt the thing I'd been refusing to feel for probably 3 years settle over me all at once, quiet and final, like a door closing. Then I reached into my purse and found Mr. Devereaux's number. I didn't drive right away. I sat in that Camry with both hands on the wheel, and I looked at Marcus's house in the rearview mirror. The one with the teal shutters I'd always thought were ugly and never said so. The one in the neighborhood they couldn't afford without my help. The driveway with the SUV I had co-signed for. I had my phone in my hand, and I wasn't sure if I was going to cry or throw it through the window. I did neither. I opened my texts. I scrolled back 6 months, further, a year. Every morning, me. Good morning, baby. Hope you all slept well. Every few days. How's Caleb doing in school? Did he like the cleats I sent? Are you eating? His replies, when they came. Yeah, busy. We'll call later. Later never came. And then the other kind of texts. The ones that always started with a number. Mom, can you do 2,000? It's a temporary thing. Mom, the car needs work. They're saying 4,500. Mom, I know this is bad timing. I had never once said no. I had said, let me see what I can do. I had said, I'll wire it this afternoon. I had said, of course, you're my son. I put the phone in my lap. Here is what I knew. 3 weeks before that birthday party, I had been standing outside Marcus's kitchen window dropping off Caleb's school shoes. I'd ordered them online when Marcus mentioned Caleb had grown out of his, and I'd heard Vanessa on the phone with her sister. She wasn't whispering. She didn't know I was there. She said, he agreed. We just need a few more months, and then we say she's getting forgetful, getting confused. Get the paperwork started. It's hers or it's ours, and I'm not losing everything we built over some old woman's pride. I had walked back to my car that day very carefully, like the ground might tilt. I hadn't said anything to Marcus. I hadn't confronted Vanessa. I had gone home, called my attorney, and started making arrangements. So when I dialed Mr. Devereaux that Saturday evening, I wasn't calling in a panic. I was giving the signal. Mr. Devereaux. Diane. His voice was steady. He'd been expecting me. Go ahead and move, tonight if you can. You're sure? I looked at the teal shutters one more time. I'm sure. I hung up, pulled out of the parking spot, and when I got to the corner and couldn't see the house anymore, I pulled over and cried for about 4 minutes, hard. Then I blew my nose on a Taco Bell napkin I found in the console, checked my face in the mirror, and drove home. You need to understand something about me before this story goes any further. I am not a woman who was born with anything. My name is Diane Coleman. I'm 67 years old. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house in East Columbus with a mother who sewed alterations out of the living room and a father who worked a double shift at the auto parts warehouse until his back gave out. My mother taught me to sew when I was 11, not as a hobby, as insurance. She said, Diane, a skill will feed you when a man can't. She was right. She was more right than I ever wanted her to be. I married Leonard Coleman in 1981. He was 34, an accountant at a shipping company, steady and calm and funny in the dry way that takes you a while to appreciate. Marcus was born in 83. I was sewing out of our apartment on Morse Road by then. Alterations, hems, custom pieces for church ladies, charging $7 for a zipper replacement, $20 for a full dress hem. I kept every dollar in a ceramic pot shaped like a hen that my mother gave me as a joke. Leonard called it the war chest. In 1996, Leonard came home with a headache. He said, probably tired. 3 hours later, he was on the kitchen floor. Stroke. He was 49 years old. He survived, but the left side of his body didn't come back the way we prayed it would. His speech was slow. He needed help bathing, dressing, eating on bad days. Marcus was 13. He couldn't stand to be in the room with his father those first months. I understood it, and it broke my heart at the same time. I had no choice but to keep moving. I opened the shop at 7. I picked Marcus up from school at 3. I came home, bathed Leonard, started dinner, helped Marcus with homework, went back to the shop in the evenings, when I could get a neighbor to sit with Leonard for 2 hours. I slept 5 hours most nights for 6 years. Leonard died in 2002. He was 55. His body had simply worn itself out. I took his life insurance, $80,000, and I put it into the shop. Bought the building on Hester Street outright. Expanded. Started importing specialty fabrics from New York and Atlanta. By 2008, I had a second location. By 2012, a third. 3 stores. My name on the window. Everything I had built with my own 2 hands. Marcus was 19 when Leonard passed. He cried at the funeral and then asked me 2 weeks later if he could borrow money to go out with his friends. "Mom," he said, "life goes on." I gave him $60 and told myself it was grief. I was wrong about that, but I wouldn't understand how wrong for another 20 years. I want to be fair about Marcus. He was not a bad person in the beginning. He was a child who grew up watching me absorb everything. Every bill, every crisis, every gap between what we needed and what we had, and he learned the wrong lesson. He learned that money appeared when things got bad enough. He learned that I would handle it. He never learned that I was the one doing the handling. By the time he graduated from Ohio State in 2005 with a business degree I had paid for, he was already $12,000 in credit card debt. I cleared it. He thanked me, swore it wouldn't happen again, and 6 months later, called me with $4,000 more. He got a job at an events company. Starting salary $2,500 a month. He rented an apartment in Clintonville. Nice neighborhood. $1,500 a month in rent, which meant I was paying the difference every month without it ever being called what it was. I told myself this was temporary, that he was getting on his feet. I told myself that for 8 years. Then he met Vanessa. She came to a cookout I hosted in the summer of 2013. Marcus had asked if he could bring a friend. She showed up in heels and a bandage dress to a Sunday afternoon cookout in my backyard. I noticed her eyes before I noticed anything else. The way they moved around my house, my car in the garage, the new range I'd had installed in the kitchen. Not admiring, assessing. She helped me carry dishes in from outside and said, very casually, "Your son says you own 3 stores. I said, "I do." She said, "How successful? You must do really well." I said, "I work hard." She smiled. That was the end of the conversation. They dated 2 years. During that time, the asks from Marcus doubled. New car payments, beach trips, a weekend in Chicago for Vanessa's birthday. I told myself he was in love, that young couples needed to find their footing. They got engaged in 2015. The wedding was $50,000. I paid all of it. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, the food. Vanessa's dress was $12,000. Imported, she said, because it's the most important day of my life, and I need to be perfect. I bought them a condo as a wedding gift. 2 bedrooms, good neighborhood, $220,000. Marcus threw his arms around me in the parking lot of the title company and called me the best mother alive. Vanessa hugged me and said I was like a second mom to her. Her hug was like being embraced by a spreadsheet. Caleb was born in 2018, and Lord, when I saw that baby, his little face, his perfect hands, those eyes that looked exactly like Leonard's, something woke up in me that I hadn't felt in years. Real joy, uncomplicated joy. I thought, here's what all of it was for. I thought Caleb would change things. Instead, he became leverage. I almost missed it. It was a Thursday evening in late March, 3 weeks before Caleb's birthday party. I had ordered a pair of sneakers online for Caleb. He'd outgrown his, Marcus had mentioned it offhand in a text, and I was dropping them off. I had texted Marcus that I was coming, but he hadn't responded, which was normal. I came through the side gate, which they told me to use because the front buzzer was broken. I could hear Vanessa talking inside the kitchen. The window above the sink was open 2 inches because it had been warm that week. I wasn't trying to listen. I walked up to the back door and was about to knock, and then I heard my name. Diane's fine. She's not going anywhere. Pause. No, she doesn't suspect anything. That's the point. I put my hand flat against the door and stood very still. We just need a few more months. Get the paperwork drafted. Dr. Foreman already said he could write a letter if we frame it right. Says she's been confused, making irrational financial decisions. Marcus handles the rest. Another pause. Longer. He hesitated at first. You know how he is. But I showed him the numbers. I laid it all out. It's her assets or it's bankruptcy, and he made his choice. She laughed a little. A real laugh, not the company one. She'll be fine in a memory care facility. She'll have people around her. We're not monsters. I heard her walk away from the window. I stood there for a moment with the sneakers in a plastic bag in my hand. Then I set the bag down on the back step, went back through the gate, and drove home. I don't remember the drive. I remember sitting on my couch for a while in the dark. I remember thinking memory care, a memory care facility. I was sharp as I had ever been. I ran 3 stores. I did the books myself. I could tell you the inventory cost per square foot on every property I owned, and they were going to pay a doctor to say I was losing my mind. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Devereaux, not in a panic, slow and steady, like I was placing a business call. I need to come in tomorrow, I said. It's time to move on the planning we discussed. He had been advising me for 12 years. He knew my business, my properties, my full financial picture. I had first gone to him 2 years earlier, actually, after Marcus asked me for $120,000 for what he called an investment opportunity. I had transferred the money. 3 months later, there was no company, no investment, just $120,000 absorbed into Marcus and Vanessa's debt. I had gone to Devereaux then, not to sue my son, but to start asking, what do I need to do to protect myself? He had told me then, get your affairs in order before anything happens to make it complicated. We had started the work. Now I was telling him to finish it. Mr. Devereaux's office was on the 8th floor of a building downtown on High Street. He had law books on wooden shelves, and he always had coffee waiting. He was 64, white-haired, unhurried. He had the manner of a man who had seen enough human ugliness that very little surprised him. I sat across from him and told him everything I had heard through that kitchen window. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we need to verify it before we move. I want documentation. I want to know what they've actually done, not just what they're planning. He had someone in mind, a private investigator he'd worked with for years, a man named Calvin Moss, retired insurance fraud investigator, now worked domestic cases and estate disputes. He gave me Calvin's card. I recognized the name immediately. Calvin Moss had been attending Bethel AME on Sundays for at least a decade. We'd never spoken more than a passing word, but I knew his face. He always sat in the 3rd row on the left with his daughter and her husband. I called him from the parking garage. He remembered me, said, Sister Coleman, I was wondering when your attorney was going to send you my way. I said, you know about my situation? He said, Devereaux's mentioned you in general terms over the years. Never specifics, just, I have a client, older woman, business owner, grown child who's been bleeding her dry. Said if it ever came to a head, he'd send her to me. That stopped me for a second. 12 years Devereaux had been watching this and keeping his counsel. Calvin got to work within a week. He was methodical, clean, and quiet. He documented 2 visits Marcus and Vanessa had made to assisted living facilities in the previous 4 months. One in Westerville, one out in Grove City. He got copies of the visitor logs through a contact he wouldn't name. He found a partially completed power of attorney document in a PDF attached to an email Vanessa had sent to her brother using an account she apparently thought was private. The document named Marcus as Diane's legal and financial representative. It was a draft, not signed, but it was real. He also pulled their full financial picture: $143,000 in combined debt, 3 pending creditor lawsuits, Marcus's car nearly 2 payments behind, Caleb's private school tuition 3 months overdue. I sat in Calvin's office on a Thursday morning and looked at those numbers on the page. I had given this man so much, and he had taken every dollar and come back for more, and somewhere in the years I stopped being his mother and became a resource he was running low on. Calvin said, "I'm sorry, Sister Coleman." I said, "Don't be. Just make sure everything is documented correctly." He did. Here's where I almost made a mistake. In the second week of Calvin's investigation, he found what looked like a financial transfer agreement between Marcus and Vanessa's brother Darren. The document was formal, typed, signed, notarized, and it referenced a real estate asset listed as a co-investment property in Diane Coleman's portfolio. My blood went cold. I called Devereaux from the parking lot of my Hester Street store. I told him what Calvin had found. He said, "Don't do anything. Let me look at it." 3 days later, he called me back. His voice was careful. "Diane, the property referenced in that document, it's not one of yours." "What?" "It's a property Marcus apparently told Darren he had partial interest in. From what I can tell, Marcus may have represented that asset to Darren as something he co-owned with you, but it's not in your portfolio. There's no transfer, no lien, nothing against your holdings. What you're looking at is Marcus making promises to his brother-in-law based on money he doesn't actually have." So Marcus had been borrowing against an inheritance he hadn't received yet, promising people assets that weren't his. The document wasn't evidence of what they'd taken from me. It was evidence of how desperate they'd gotten. The relief lasted about 30 seconds. Then Devereaux said, "The problem is the timeline. We have to assume they know we looked at this. If Calvin's source at that document registry is traceable, Marcus or Vanessa may figure out that someone's been asking questions. We may need to move faster than planned." That cost us 2 weeks. Devereaux called in a financial auditor to do a full sweep of every account with my name on it. Stores, personal savings, investment accounts, everything. The audit cost me $600 and 2 weeks I'd wanted to use for something else. We found nothing had been moved, but the clock had sped up. We finished the estate reorganization in a single week. There is a specific kind of quiet that a notary's office has. Small room, fluorescent light, the smell of paper and toner, a camera on a tripod, 2 witnesses who don't know you and don't need to. I had 2 psychological evaluations on record by then, 2 separate clinicians, neither of whom knew the other, both of whom concluded that Diane Marie Coleman was fully competent, oriented, and capable of making her own legal and financial decisions. Dr. Anita Reeves had spent 90 minutes with me and told me my recall was sharper than most people 20 years younger. I had those reports in a folder in my lap. Devereaux walked me through everything one more time before the recording started. The commercial building on Hester Street, the one I'd owned outright since 2002, valued at $680,000, was being donated to Riverside Senior Care, a nonprofit facility that had been on a waiting list for expansion space for 3 years. Irrevocable. Done. The 2 remaining commercial properties, the one on Clover Avenue and the shop on Fairmont Street, were going into an irrevocable trust in Caleb's name. He could access them at 25. The rental income would accumulate in a restricted account he alone could claim at age. Marcus could not touch them. Neither could I. Once signed, 70% of my investment portfolio, roughly $600,000, transferred to separate funds in Caleb's name, same age restriction. I kept 30% to live on. Comfortably, if I was careful. I knew how to be careful. My apartment on Broad Street, paid off, valued at $320,000, stayed mine until I died. Then to Caleb, Marcus's inheritance, $50,000, and his father's personal belongings, Leonard's watches, his good coat, his tools, still in the garage, his Bible with the handwritten notes in the margins. The things that should have meant something. The camera came on. The notary said, "You may begin when you're ready." I looked into the lens. I said, "My name is Diane Coleman. I am 67 years old. I'm of sound mind, as confirmed by 2 independent psychological evaluations dated this month, copies of which are attached to this record." I took a breath. I said, "I spent 40 years building something from a sewing machine in a 2-bedroom apartment. I raised my son alone after my husband's stroke, and I did not stop working. Not once. I believed for a long time that love meant absorbing everything my child needed, including things he should have carried himself. I was wrong about that. That is not love. That is damage dressed up as devotion." My voice stayed even. I had practiced this. I said, "I recently learned that my son and his wife have been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and removed from control of my own estate. I am documenting this now so that no judge, no attorney, and no family member can claim I did not know what I was doing." The room was very still. I said, "What I am doing is choosing where my work goes. It goes to my grandson. It goes to the seniors at Riverside who have nowhere better to be. It goes to everyone except the people who looked at me and saw only a number." I looked directly at the camera. I said, "Marcus, if you ever see this, I love you. I've always loved you. But I will not be anyone's plan B. Not anymore." I signed everything. Outside, the sun was going down orange over the parking garage across the street. Devereaux stood beside me on the sidewalk and asked how I felt. I said, "Strangely fine." He said, "They're going to come at you hard." I said, "I know. I'm ready." He said, "The call to Marcus goes out when you give me the word." I looked at the orange sky. I said, "After the birthday party, I wanted them to enjoy one more day thinking everything was theirs." No. So now you know what I was carrying when I walked through that gate on Saturday evening with Caleb's pocket watch in my hands. I want to go back to that yard for a minute, because I want you to understand what it actually felt like to stand in that corner next to those trash bins with the whole party happening 20 feet away from me. Caleb was in the bounce house when I arrived. I could see him through the mesh netting. His little face lit up, laughing at something one of his friends did. 7 years old, gap in his front teeth. He still ran a little pigeon-toed, which Leonard had done too. My heart squeezed every time I saw it. He didn't know I was there yet. Vanessa had made sure of that. She guided me to that chair before Caleb could see me come in. Efficient, clean. If I had made a scene, she could have told everyone the old woman got confused and upset. Look how she's been lately. Everything they'd been building toward. Instead, I just stood there. When Marcus came out and said what he said, "I figured you'd be more comfortable out here, Ma." I watched his face very carefully. He wasn't uncomfortable. He wasn't apologetic. He was satisfied. There was a particular kind of ease in his expression, the ease of a man who has decided something and is watching it work. My son felt good about this. That was the thing that finished it. Not Vanessa's venom, which I had expected. Marcus's comfort. His genuine, relaxed comfort with what he was doing to me. I placed the box on the plastic seat. I turned around. I walked through that yard one last time, and I let myself look at it the way you look at a place you know you're not coming back to. The superhero streamers, the candy table with the little bags and ribbon, Caleb's laugh from inside the bounce house. I let myself look at Caleb longer than anything else. I went out the front gate, got in my car, and called Devereaux. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Do it now." He said, "I'll call Marcus within the hour." I drove away. I did not go home right away. I ended up in the parking lot of a Walgreens on Cleveland Avenue. I don't know why that particular Walgreens. I just drove until I stopped. I sat there for a while. I watched people go in and out with their little plastic bags, a woman trying to get a stroller through the automatic door, two teenagers arguing about something. My phone started going at 6:47. Marcus. I watched it ring. It rang again at 6:52, 6:59. A number I didn't recognize, probably Vanessa's sister or her mother. Someone at that party who had heard the commotion. I turned the phone face down and drove to a Subway on Livingston and got a 6-inch turkey on wheat and ate it in the car. It tasted like nothing. I ate the whole thing anyway because I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and I was not going to let those people make me forget to eat. Then I drove home. My apartment was quiet. I turned on the television for the noise, some home improvement competition show, and I sat on Leonard's old couch that I still had, that I refused to replace because it had his shape in the cushions a little still, if you knew where to look. I thought about Marcus getting that call. I thought about Vanessa's face. I felt something I didn't expect. Not triumph. Not yet. Just space. Like a noise I'd gotten so used to I'd forgotten it was there had finally gone quiet. I went to bed at 9:30. I slept for 7 hours straight. I had not slept that well in 2 years. They came on Tuesday morning. I was at the Hester Street store, or rather, the store I still managed, but which now belonged to Riverside Senior Care. I was reorganizing the fabric display in the front window when I heard the bell on the door. I didn't have to look up to know. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. He was wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans, the kind of clothes he wore when he couldn't manage anything more demanding. Dark circles, his jaw tight. Vanessa was in her work clothes, jacket, heels, full face. She had not let the crisis disorganize her presentation, and I noted that. It told me she still thought she could manage this. I kept arranging the fabric. Marcus said, "Mom, we need to talk." I said, "All right, talk." He looked at Vanessa, back at me. "Not here. Come home. We'll sit down." "Say what you need to say here, Marcus." Vanessa stepped forward. She had her chin up. I had seen that posture before. It was the posture of someone who has prepared a speech. "Diane, I don't know what Devereaux told you, but you made decisions that affect this whole family. You can't just what? Donate $680,000 without talking to us. Without talking to you. We're family." I set the fabric bolt down on the counter. I turned around fully and looked at them both. "Marcus," I said, "when you put me next to the garbage cans at your son's birthday party, did you think of me as family?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "When you and Vanessa visit assisted living facilities in Westerville and Grove City and started looking into how to have me declared incompetent." I reached under the counter and placed a folder on top of it. "Did you think of me as family then?" The color left his face. "How?" He looked at the folder. "How do you know about that?" "Oh, Marcus." I opened the folder. "I know everything. Visitor logs, the draft power of attorney document Vanessa emailed to her brother from her second account, Dr. Foreman's preliminary notes about a letter he was willing to write." I looked at Vanessa. "Did you really think I'd just sit around waiting to be managed?" Vanessa's mouth opened. Nothing came out for a moment. "Then you had us investigated." "I did. That's an invasion of what? Exactly." She stopped. Marcus put his hands over his face. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Mom, I didn't want it to go this way. It was," she showed me the numbers, the debt, and I panicked. I thought if we could just get some breathing room, by having me locked away in a 4-person room at a memory care facility. It wasn't going to be like that. I know what facility you chose. Final Haven in Grove City. $2,800 a month. 4 to a room. I looked it up. I closed the folder. I've been in that building. I've visited people there. It smells like mildew, and the staff-to-resident ratio is 1 to 11. Vanessa said, "We were going to handle it better than that. You were going to put me there so you could sell everything I built and spend it the same way you've spent every other dollar I gave you. The same way you spent the wedding money, the apartment money. The $120,000 Marcus told me was an investment." Marcus closed his eyes. "That money went to your credit card debt and a lease on a car." "I know," he said quietly. "You lied to me. I know. And when that wasn't enough, your next step was to eliminate me entirely." Vanessa said, "Marcus, say something." "Don't you dare," Marcus said. "Not to me." To her. His voice went sharp and hard in a way I had not heard from him in years. "Don't tell me to say something. This is as much yours as mine. You're the one who found the lawyer. You're the one who called Foreman. You agreed. I was scared. You signed the documents. They were drafts. You visited the facility with me. You sat across from that intake counselor and smiled. I let them go. I stood behind my counter and I watched my son and his wife tear into each other like two people who had finally run out of someone else to blame. Marcus threw numbers, money he claimed she'd wasted. Vanessa threw them back, debts she said were his fault. They talked over each other, interrupted, went in circles. It was ugly and small, and it had nothing to do with me anymore. I said quietly, "Enough." They both looked at me. The Aurora Street building, Hester Street, is now Riverside Senior Care's property. The transfer was finalized Friday. It cannot be reversed. The 2 remaining commercial properties are in an irrevocable trust for Caleb. 70% of my investment portfolio is in restricted accounts in his name. My apartment is mine until I pass, then his. I looked at Marcus. You will receive $50,000 and your father's personal belongings, his watches, his good coat, the Bible with his notes in the margins. That's what I'm leaving you. Silence. You can attempt to contest it. Mr. Devereaux will explain why that would be expensive and unsuccessful. The psychological evaluations alone will be difficult to argue against. Marcus put his face back in his hands. His shoulders started shaking. Vanessa looked at me with pure hatred. She said, "You let your own son lose everything just to prove a point." I said, "I didn't take anything from Marcus. He spent it. You 2 spent it together. I just stopped being the floor you fell back on." She said, "You're going to regret this." I said, "If you threaten me in my own store again, I will call the police, and you will have one more problem on top of everything else." She looked at Marcus. He was still sitting in the chair by the wall, face in his hands. She said his name twice. He didn't move. She picked up her bag and left. The bell rang sharp over the door. Marcus sat there for another few minutes. When he lifted his head, his eyes were red and swollen, and something in his face looked younger than it had in years. Not better, just younger, like a layer had come off. He said, "What about Caleb?" I said, "I'm filing for visitation rights. I'll see him through the court." He said, "Mom," I said, "Not today, Marcus. Go home." He went. I sat down in the chair he'd been using. I looked at the fabric bolts, the old Singer machine in the back that I still kept even though I had 4 commercial machines now. My mother's machine, actually. I'd had it refurbished twice. I let myself cry for about 2 minutes. Not a lot, just enough to let the pressure out. Then I got up and went back to work. That night, I called my friend Renee from church, not to tell her what happened, just to hear her voice. She talked for 40 minutes about her daughter's new house and the contractors and some drama with a neighbor's dog. I said, "Uh-huh, and you're kidding, and that's wild in the right places." It was exactly what I needed. When she finally asked how I was doing, I said, "Fine, tired, having a bit of a week." She said, Well, you can call me for real if you need to. I said, I know. I'm okay. I was okay. That was the part that kept surprising me. I'd expected to feel destroyed. I'd been so afraid of what doing this would feel like that I'd put it off for years. And instead, what I felt was just quiet. A very specific, exhausted quiet. I had been holding a rope for a long time. I had let go of it. My hands were sore, but they were free. I did not sleep as well the second night. I lay awake thinking about Caleb, his gap-toothed smile, the way he said grandma like it was two separate words with equal weight. Grandma. I thought about the last time I'd seen him, 2 months before the party, at a stiff and shortened visit that Vanessa had engineered to be as brief and transactional as possible. He'd hugged me in the hallway and whispered, I miss you, Grandma. Why don't you come more? I had not had a good answer for him. I needed to fix that. I called Devereaux in the morning and told him to draw up the visitation petition. The legal process for grandparent visitation moved slowly, the way legal processes do. I had 2.5 months to fill. My knees had been bothering me for 2 years, not severely, a tightness, an ache that came back when I sat too long. I'd been ignoring it because I'd been too busy managing everyone else's problems to manage my own body. My doctor had mentioned water aerobics twice. I had smiled and not done it. I signed up for a Tuesday-Thursday class at the YMCA on Broad Street, 8:15 in the morning, which meant I had to actually get up and get moving instead of sitting in the apartment with my thoughts. The first class I showed up and stood at the edge of the pool feeling faintly ridiculous in my swimsuit. There were 7 other women in the class, ranging from late 50s to early 80s, and an instructor named Kim who had enough energy for all of us combined. I'm not a woman who makes friends quickly. I sat with people and smiled and contributed to conversation and went home to my own company by preference. But there was a woman named Paulette, 71, round face, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, who sat next to me during the cool-down stretch and said, First time? You've got that look. I said, What look? She said, Like you're deciding whether this was a mistake. I said, I'm reserving judgment. She laughed, loud enough that Kim looked over. Paulette became someone I talked to on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Not a close friend, but someone to sit with, which was more than I'd had outside of church and work in longer than I wanted to admit. I also started volunteering at Riverside Senior Care on Saturday mornings. They were renovating the Hester Street Annex, what used to be my building, and Mary, the director, had taken to calling me whenever she wanted input on the layout. I came in with a notepad and opinions about natural light, and she listened to most of them. But the volunteering itself, sitting with the residents, bringing my mother's tea cake recipe on Saturdays, just being present and listening, that did something to me I hadn't expected. I met a man named George, 83, former accountant, who'd had his house sold out from under him by his adult children. He told me about it with zero bitterness. Just, that happened. I'm here now. I have people around me. I have respect. More than I had at home at the end. He said, You know what's funny? I don't miss any of them as much as I thought I would. I miss who I thought they were. That's different. I thought about that for days. The hearing was 4 months after the party. Marcus and Vanessa had contested the visitation petition. Their attorney argued that I was an unstable influence, that I had acted erratically and vindictively in reorganizing my estate, that my sudden focus on court proceedings indicated a troubling pattern. Devereaux let them make their case. Then he put 3 things in front of the judge. First, the 2 psychological evaluations, both clear, both unambiguous. Neither evaluator had any prior relationship with me or with Riverside Senior Care. Second, testimony from my store manager, Gail, who had worked for me for 11 years. and from Mary at Riverside, and from Kim at the YMCA, all of whom could speak to my daily functioning, my judgment, my reliability. Gail made the judge laugh once, not on purpose, just by being completely matter-of-fact about what I was like to work for. She said, "Diane hasn't made an irrational decision in 11 years. She once spent 3 weeks deciding whether to change the storefront hours by half an hour. Third, Marcus and Vanessa's financial documentation, $143,000 in combined debt, 3 pending creditor lawsuits, Caleb's private school tuition 4 months overdue, Marcus's car insurance lapsed. 2 creditors had already sent notices about the condo mortgage. The judge looked at the financial records for a long time. Then he looked at Marcus. He said, "Mr. Coleman, you've argued in this proceeding that your mother is unfit for unsupervised contact with your son. Is that correct?" Marcus's attorney said something. The judge held up a hand. He said, "You have over $140,000 in outstanding debt, 3 active lawsuits from creditors, and your child's school payments are significantly in arrears. And you're telling me that the woman who owns 3 stores, volunteers at a care facility, maintains 2 psychological clearances, and is asking to take her grandson to the park twice a month is the unstable party here?" Silence. "I don't see it that way. I got visitation. 2nd and 4th Sunday of each month, 9 in the morning to 6 in the evening. 1 Wednesday afternoon per month. School pickup at 3. I sat in the car in the courthouse parking garage afterward and called Devereaux to say thank you. He said, 'Thank yourself.' I just organized what was already true. I drove to Riverside and told Mary. She hugged me for a long time. The first Sunday I rang their bell at 9 o'clock exactly. I had been up since 6. I'd gone back and forth 3 times about what to wear, which was not like me, and then I put on my good gray cardigan and my good walking shoes, and I told myself to stop being anxious about a door. Vanessa answered it. She was in a robe. Her hair wasn't done. She looked at me with the particular expression of someone who has run out of moves. I said, "Good morning, Vanessa. I'm here to pick up Caleb." She stepped back and let me in. I heard him before I saw him. Running feet. The thump-thump of a 7-year-old coming down a hallway at speed. He rounded the corner and stopped when he saw me. For just 1 second, that half-breath where a child is deciding whether the thing they're seeing is real, he just looked at me. Then he said, "Grandma." And he hit me like a small freight train. I held him. He was bigger than I remembered. They always get bigger in the months you miss. His hair smelled like that coconut detangler I'd given Vanessa a year ago. He was talking already, telling me something about a new dinosaur game, something about a kid at school named Jordan, his words tumbling over each other. I said, "I hear you. Tell me everything." Marcus was at the far end of the hallway. He'd been watching. He looked like a man who hasn't had a full night's sleep in 2 months, which he probably hadn't. He looked at Caleb and then at me, and I don't know what all was in his face. I didn't study it. I didn't have the bandwidth. I got Caleb's backpack from Vanessa. I signed the form Devereaux had told me to always sign for the record. I took my grandson's hand and I walked out that door. We went to Schiller Park first. He ran ahead on the path and waited for me at every curve, bouncing on his toes. We fed the ducks with the heel of a hot dog bun I'd brought. He told me about his teacher, about his best friend Marcus from school, who he said was different from his dad, even though they had the same name, about how he could now do a front walkover in gymnastics. I just listened. At lunch, we went to his favorite pizza place, the one with the video games in the back. And he had 2 slices of pepperoni, and I had 1, and he beat me at the claw machine 3 times, and I let him think it wasn't on purpose. On the way back in the car, he got quiet. He said, "Grandma, where did you go?" I looked in the rear view. His face was serious the way small faces get when they've been carrying a question for a long time. I said, "I had some things I needed to take care of. grown-up things. But I'm not going anywhere now, okay? Every other Sunday and one Wednesday. That's a promise. He said, "Do you promise?" I said, "I promise." He nodded like that settled it. And then he leaned his head against the window and talked the rest of the way home about dinosaurs. I brought him back at 6 exactly. Marcus was at the door. We didn't speak. He looked at Caleb, really looked at him, the way you look at a child you've been failing and you know it. And something moved in his face. Not enough, but something. I said, "He was wonderful. He always is." I walked back to my car. The drive home, I had both windows down, even though it was starting to get cool. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove. 4 months in, Caleb started telling me things on Wednesdays. Not all at once. Children don't confess. They leak. A detail here, a comment there, something they drop and then look at you to see whether you'll pick it up. He told me one Wednesday in the car that his mom had been crying a lot. He told me the next week that his dad had come to pick him up on a Saturday and smelled funny. He told me the Wednesday after that his mom had said, during a fight he'd heard from his room, that if it wasn't for him, she'd have gotten out 2 years ago. I pulled over when he said that last one. I turned around in the seat and looked at him. I said, "That is not true. Your mother loves you. Whatever's happening between the adults in your family has nothing to do with you being born. Do you understand?" He said, "She sounded like she meant it." I said, "People say things they don't mean when they're scared. That doesn't make it okay, but it's not about you. It was never about you." I started keeping notes after that. Dates, what he'd said, the specific words as close as I could remember. I began keeping my phone's voice recorder running in my cardigan pocket during our time together. Not recording Caleb without him knowing, but logging my own observations immediately after drop-off, while it was fresh. I wrote down every missed school pickup, every time Marcus canceled a visitation, every piece of Caleb's affect I thought was worth documenting. Then in the second month, I lost 2 weeks of notes. I had been backing everything up to a thumb drive I kept in my desk drawer. The drive corrupted. I found out when I tried to open the files and got nothing. 3 weeks of careful documentation, gone. I sat at my kitchen table and put my head in my hands. Then I called Devereaux. He said, "Okay, let's talk about rebuilding this more carefully." We set up a proper documentation system. Everything backed up in real time to a secure cloud account, a second copy emailed weekly to Devereaux's office. I went back through my calendar and reconstructed what I could from memory and text messages. It cost me a month of momentum, but what I rebuilt was more thorough than what I'd lost. Sometimes a setback will do that, force you to be more careful than you would have been if it had gone smoothly the first time. Devereaux said in March, "Diane, I think we have enough to file for full custody." I had been waiting for him to say that. The thing about custody cases is that they go slowly and then all at once. We filed in February. The court appointed a social worker to assess the living situations of all parties. We submitted documentation, witness statements, Caleb's school attendance records, the teacher's report, the pediatrician's notes. The social worker visited Vanessa's mother's apartment first. 2 bedrooms, 3 children already, Caleb sleeping on a fold-out in the living room, his backpack in a corner by the TV because there was no desk. She noted in her report, inadequate study environment, high household stress level, child appeared withdrawn. She visited Marcus's rental next, a studio in Reynoldsburg, beer cans on the counter. He'd apparently cleaned but not well enough. No bedroom for Caleb, a sleeping bag on the floor. Then she came to my apartment on Broad Street. I had set up Caleb's room the spring before, when this had still been more hope than certainty. Single bed with a navy comforter, his own desk with a lamp, a small bookshelf with the series I knew he'd been reading, and a couple more I thought he'd get to, his own dresser. She stood in the doorway and looked at it for a moment without writing anything, Then she wrote something. The verdict came on a Tuesday morning in October. Devereaux called me before 9. He said, "Diane, sit down." I was already sitting. He said, "Full custody. You've been granted full physical and legal custody of Caleb. Marcus and Vanessa each get 2 supervised visits per month." I sat there with the phone against my ear. I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "It's done." I put the phone down on the table and I looked at the kitchen. The table with the 2 chairs. The chair that had been empty. The coffee maker I had started buying the caramel-flavored pods for because Caleb had tried mine once and said it smelled good even though he was too young for coffee. I cried for a while, the kind of crying that is mostly relief and exhaustion with some joy underneath. Then I called Renee. I said, "I need to tell you something." And I told her everything. About the chair by the trash bins, about the overheard phone call, about Devereaux and Calvin and the notary room and every Sunday. All of it. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "Diane Coleman, you have been carrying all of this by yourself." I said, "I didn't want to put it on anyone until it was done." She said, "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever loved." I said, "My mother taught me that." I picked Caleb up from school that afternoon. I had not told him yet. I waited until we got home, until he'd had his after-school snack, until he was settled at the kitchen table with his homework. Then I sat down across from him. I said, "Caleb, baby, how would you feel about living here? With me? Your own room? Permanently?" He looked at me for a long moment. His face was doing a lot of things. He said, "Like, all the time?" I said, "All the time." He got up from his chair and climbed into my lap, which he was getting a bit big for, but I wasn't going to say so, and he put his arms around my neck and didn't say anything for a while. I held on. Caleb is 9 now. He'll be 10 in the spring. He does his homework at the kitchen table every afternoon while I'm cooking. He narrates whatever he's thinking as he does it, tells me what the math problem is, asks me whether I know anything about the solar system, informs me of the current drama involving Jordan from school. I say, and really, and what did you say? And I try to have this expression on my face like I have nowhere else to be. Because I don't. He has judo on Tuesdays and Thursdays. His instructor says he has good instincts, which I believe because he has always had good instincts, that child. He sleeps in his room with the navy comforter and leaves his shoes in the middle of the floor, and I have to remind him 3 times about the shoes, and I do not mind a single one of those reminders. The Arnold Coleman wing opened at Riverside in November. New annex, 20 beds. Small sign by the entrance with Leonard's name on it. I went to the opening and stood outside the door of the main room for a little while before going in, looking at the sign. Leonard would have found this funny and then told me I did the right thing in that order. He had been that kind of man. Marcus came around in December, not with an apology at first, just to see Caleb, per the visitation schedule. He had been clean, dressed, showing up on time. He had gotten a new position, a warehouse supervisor role, less money than before, but steady. He'd moved into a smaller apartment, decent neighborhood. The first visit where he actually talked to Caleb. Really talked, put the phone away, asked questions, listened to the answers. I watched from the kitchen doorway. Something in my chest loosened that I had not known was still tight. He brought someone with him in January, a woman named Patricia. Early 40s, soft-spoken, quick smile. She shook my hand and said she'd heard a lot about me. I said, "Good things, I hope." Marcus looked at the floor, then at me, and said, "All good things." I let that sit for a moment. We had not had a real conversation since the shop on Hester Street. I was not ready for one yet, but I looked at my son standing in my hallway with some genuine sheepishness on his face, and I thought, there is something left to work with here. Not what was, but something. After they left, Caleb came and sat next to me on the couch. He said, "Grandma, do you like Patricia?" I said, "I don't know her yet." He said, "She let me pick the radio station." I said, "High praise." He grinned. Gap finally grown in, both front teeth all the way. He went back to his room. I sat on Leonard's couch in my apartment that I will live in until I don't have to anymore, and I thought about the plastic chair by the trash bins. I thought about how clearly I had understood in that moment that I had been placed somewhere I did not belong, and how that clarity, which had felt like the end of something, had actually been the beginning. I spent 40 years building something real, thread by thread, dollar by dollar, early morning after early morning after early morning. I did not do it to leave it to people who saw it only as something they were owed. I did it because building was what I knew how to do. Because my mother taught me a skill and the skill became a life. My place was never beside the things people throw away. It was here, at the center of my own life, with my grandson's shoes in the middle of the floor and the caramel coffee pods and the judo tournament schedule on the refrigerator and Leonard's old couch still holding its shape. It took longer than it should have to figure that out, but I am a stubborn woman, and I got there. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.